All right. Well, in the hotel room, here we are going to do a video. The news came out yesterday that s1mple would be missing 2 to 3 to 4 weeks for his visa issues. He's going to be missing DreamHack Austin with Liquid, and if they qualify, he will not go to Pro League Finals with them as well. Um, and this got some attention, but I mean, for me personally, I think it's actually kind of a blessing in disguise. But also, it's kind of like that's the issues that Liquid has right now are actually much bigger than just these visa issues going on for Team Liquid. So I kind of want to run down. There's like this triangle of roster issues this team has between Adren, between Kusta, and s1mple. And I kind of want to touch on each one, and then we'll move from there. But to start things out, let's start with Adren, who had that big performance at the major. He was cut before the major for Kusta to be brought in, and just because of the rules of the Valve system, of the minor and major system, he wasn't Kusta wasn't allowed to play, so Adren had to come back in. Did a good job at the major. Had a fantastic group stage. Had a pretty solid playoff stage. But here's the big thing: that performance in the group stage of the major. While impressive, is the outlier for Adren. Like, that's not what he normally produces. There's far more examples of him struggling to be a solid player, a good player. That's the one event where he really hit that level. So you can't really be confident moving forward that he's going to play at that level. You can't just take that one performance of the major and say, all right, this is the Adren that you're always going to have, so we're going to keep him. And I saw a lot of people on Reddit, a lot of people on forums and everything like that, saying, this is why you keep Adren. This is the reason why he should be the starting player in this roster, in this Team Liquid. Even though, they're ignoring every other event where he played poorly. A couple things that you have to note is that going into the major as well, not trying to fit into any kind of a system. He's very much playing for himself. He knows, he even said it in interviews, he knows he's probably playing for his future career. If he had done a bad job there'd be no question he wouldn't be on Liquid. Probably wouldn't have as much interest from other teams as a player. Because he actually, there's been some videos released, and this is actually very true. He had good tactical input. He's very solid as a tactician, a strategist. He's not going to blow your socks off with it, but he has those ideas. He's played this game for a long time. Obviously, his YouTube videos, he's very intelligent when it comes to strategic aspects, but he's not a good in-game leader. So there's no real. They've tried him as an in-game leader, and that team struggled very mightily under his calling. So there's this whole thing where you can't just bring him onto a team as a second in-game leader, a secondary caller. That can't be your primary reason for bringing him in. He needs to be able to perform, and he needs to be able to do it well. And then obviously there's the clashes with s1mple. Well documented. Him and s1mple did not get along, as many people don't get along with s1mple. But even Hiko said it in interviews that it's very obvious and it's no secret that those two definitely don't get along. And while s1mple kind of changed his tune a little bit after the major, that's once again just because of that performance that you can't count on happening in the future. So it's not like there's going to be, if Adren comes back into this lineup, that it's going to be, all happiness from there with s1mple in the roster. The other big thing as well when it comes to Adren is that since they've already cut him, if this team with Adren in it goes on any kind of a losing streak or a slump, or has a rough couple matches or anything like that, their first thought, and especially if Adren's not performing during the slump, is going to be, why did we ever bring him back? We already cut him. And now all of a sudden, in the back of their minds, it's going to be this thought of like, this is why we don't want Adren on the team. This is why we didn't want to keep him months ago. And then on the other hand, for Adren, it's going to be like, okay, I'm on the chopping block. They've already cut me once. They can easily do it again. They've obviously shown that they're more than willing to get me off this team, that they're not always happy with what I can provide. So bringing Adren back as a player would be an absolute nightmare. I think for both parties, not just for Liquid, not just for Adren. I think both parties that would be a massive issue moving forward. So then onto the Kusta situation. He essentially had, and I'm going to try, I know I've been very, very positive about Kusta. It's very well known. I know I got a lot of comments after Malmo of being favorite towards Kusta. But for most of this, I think I have a pretty unbiased attitude about this situation that has occurred. Malmo for Kusta was a lose-lose situation. Leading into the major, when s1mple comes out and says, I'd rather play with Adren in Malmo, I'd rather play with Adren at DreamHack. That's just not, it's not something you want to hear as a teammate who you're replacing for that event. Yeah, especially from the star player. That's just not an environment you want to be in. Going into that event as well, no matter how good or how bad Liquid did, it was always going to fall on that Kusta for Adren exchange. It was the spotlight was always going to be on how Kusta did compared to Adren, or how Adren did compared to Kusta. No matter what, I mean, the only win that Kusta had at this event was for Liquid to either get back to the semifinals, to do even better, and him to be absolutely insane, to him just dominate, which is insane to expect out of a player at his first major event, first time playing against teams of this quality. So that was something that is very, very tough to deal with as a new player. He actually played okay against Mouse Sports. Not great, not good. Played okay. He hit the shots he needed to. He didn't try and like take over the match. He didn't get super aggressive. He didn't. I mean, the one place aspect of his game that he actually didn't do well at all was that in rosters like Selfless. I mean, he was able to take over games for his team. He was able to create openings for him. He wasn't doing that on Liquid. Which would come into like comfort level with the team and comfort level with the environment. But in this particular instance, essentially all he was doing was playing a very supportive style of opping, not trying to do too much. And he hit some shots that he needed to. He missed some shots as well, obviously, but played okay. Nothing special. Nothing. I mean, no red flags. Actually, in that game, he was actually the second best performer on the team. If you go to the HLTV ratings, he was right below Hiko, and then I mean, s1mple, Elige, and Nitro were all beneath him, and that's one of the big things. Is you look at the attention that was on Kusta. No one talks about how Elige struggled in that matchup. No one talks about how Nitro wasn't that stellar. It's all about Kusta. He went 17 for 17, and it's all about why didn't he take over? Why was he not a god? And then you go into the next match, and he gets completely thrown under the bus. And I'm going to touch on this more later because I think it deserves its own little section. But Liquid decided to take the op out of his hands for their matchup against Tai Lu, and he essentially got thrown into roles that he wasn't accustomed to. We could touch on that later, but entirely thrown under the bus versus the Chinese team. But really what happened at Malmo for Kusta is that Team Liquid mismanaged that so much. Because the issue now is that they barely gave him a chance to show what he could do. He had one game against Mouse Sports with an AWP, and then they took it right out of his hands the next game. So he had essentially one match at Malmo to prove that he could be some kind of star player, that he was going to be nuts at his first big event, his first major land performance at an international event. So that's just crazy. And now because they took that out of his hands, they have essentially one map of information on what he can do, what he can provide to the team, what kind of player he might be able to be, where they can build upon, where they can help him improve, how they can change his roles, or how they can put him in better situations. And that's insane because now they have this entire roster situation. They have no intel to go off of. So there's that one. And then moving on to s1mple, which is the big one. I actually think s1mple is probably going to get a lot of attention. He still, for the amount of skill he has, it's insane. He still makes massive amounts of errors as an individual that prevents his team from actually winning, prevents good team play, prevents them from grinding out close matches. When it comes down to the wire, it's essentially if s1mple does something crazy with the plays he makes, they're going to win. And if he doesn't, they're going to lose. It's just very much 50-50. And that's insane to think that he's still doing these, he's still making these kind of plays, still harboring this play style. There's no secret of his clashes with Adren, his clashes with, maybe not clashes, but his opinions on Kusta. He's very vocal in his stream, even when it's negative, very vocal in public, even when it's negative. He just brings down team morale. It's very well known that leading up to the major even, that the practice environment of this team was not good. They actually had to cancel practices leading up to the major because he couldn't get along with Adren. And things of that nature. So it's ruining this team environment. It's making it so difficult for other players to perform well. It makes it so difficult to practice and to institute new things. And you just can't run a team like this. And now the next way that Liquid actually mismanaged this entire situation at Malmo with Kusta and Tai Lu is that he wakes up one morning and he says, I want to be the primary opper. I want to op this game. I want it in my hands. And they say, okay, you can have it. We'll take it away from Kusta. You do whatever you want. So essentially, he's got way too much power in this team. Now you have this really volatile player, and he gets to dictate how the team plays. He gets to dictate the rules of this team, and that's insanity. And so Liquid really shot themselves in the foot here. But s1mple himself has got to grow up in this sense. And if it doesn't happen, he's eventually just going to get forced out of the pro scene because no one's going to want to play with him. And then let's focus a little bit on the situation against Tai Lu in Malmo. Um, so let's not say this. Let's get this right off the bat. Kusa did not play well in this game. He did not have a good game whatsoever. Um, he did not look comfortable in his roles, which is understandable. His team took away the primary role, the one that he'd been practicing with him in for months, and they put him into like lurking positions. They put him into really isolated one-on-one positions. And he's really, really inexperienced when it comes to this kind of competition, especially when you take his role away from him, which, by the way, he's probably never played in any team ever. He's probably always been the dominant opera on all of his. I mean, every time I've watched him over the past year and a half, 2 years, he's always been just the primary opera. Now he can do rifling. He's not bad with it. But in these situations, you give him that rifle and you put him into a spot where all of a sudden he's having to be part of these tactics from a perspective he's never experienced. That's not going to go well. On top of that, operas are notoriously like prideful players. It very much requires a lot of confidence in how you peak, in the fights you take, in the movement that you have, and when you take that op away from them, it's essentially a slap in the face. It's an insult, and that's exactly what they did. They hamstring him here in this matchup. Actually, I mean, I was talking to even Get Right about it, and he mentioned when Alu first joined the NIP roster way back when, Get Right bought an AWP at one point in a match, and Alu pulled him aside afterwards and was like, "You never buy an op over me. Like that's just not allowed. As an opper, it just kills me. It makes me lose my confidence, makes me lose faith in myself, and that can't happen." So, I mean, these players who are the primary op, you can't do that to them, especially because in the situation with Kusta, as an inexperienced players, it's very often that we see players come in and they have very much momentum-based games. They're very snowbally without experience. Where if they get off to a slow start, it's difficult for newer players to get back into the game to be effective after a bad start. If they get off to a hot start, they play very, very well. They're not maybe not very, very well, but they play much, much better. So when you take that away from him in the first half, he's on the T side in situations and he's getting like 3 kills. He doesn't know exactly what he's doing in these tactics. He's trying to take one-on-one battles, against Nico and Chris J with an op, and he's like lurking in over towards the A bomb site at Kabul. It's things like that. That's just gonna shut down your confidence as a new player, and that's gonna never let you get into the swing or the feel of the game. And because I saw a lot of people, and I really need to hit this home. A lot of people commenting saying, "Oh well, at this level, it's not good enough to just be good with the AWP. You need to be able to be good with an AK-47 as well," which is true. But that's not the issue you're facing here. It's not about needing to be good with an AK-47. It's about the fact that he's not in roles that he knows how to play. He's not in positions where he knows how to play because they haven't practiced any of it. He's never been in them. He's only been in this team for 2-3 months, and there's no chance of him having, been in these situations with an AK-47. So it's just all this stuff is just piled on. And then I made the comment on the desk, which got a lot of attention as well, when I said that Liquid would have beat Tyloo if Kusta was opping on the T side. And I still 100% agree with that. If you go back and watch that game, with the AWP, s1mple gave up a lot of position and made a lot of really dumb, stupid plays on platform, covering his teammates for plant, and in post-plant positions, he's on B platform, and he's giving that up with an AWP, which, by the way, is like the perfect spot to have an op in. That's essentially like a win up on that spot. And he would jump down and he would try and take fights and he would try and chase down kills. It honestly looked like he was just trying to end the game as soon as possible, no matter what the outcome. And if you have Kusta up there, I'm not going to say he would have hit the shots, because I don't think you can really go back and say that. They are easier shots to hit for an opper. But just that positioning allows his teammates so much more mobility in their post plant. It allows them to be so much more comfortable behind cover because he's got all the angles. He can at least provide intel. And even in that position at times, it might just scare Tyloo away from trying to retake the bomb sites. It might force them into a save round, give Liquid an extra round, and that's all that would have been needed. I mean, they did go into overtime. Another situation was s1mple with the AWP in overtime. There were a couple times I saw him over at the A bomb site 5-on-5, and he's trying to entry into the A bomb site with an AWP. This is a game where Nitro has like 43 kills or something like that, known for being an entry fragger. Why aren't you letting Nitro do this? Like these are the things. s1mple trying to take over that game actually cost them the game because he's trying to do too much, and that's a lack of confidence in his team. So all these things, all of a sudden, it's got them into this situation where they've got to figure out if they're going to keep Kusa, if they're going to keep Adren, if they're going to keep s1mple, all these different things going on. And so let's just talk about what I would do if I'm the GM of Team Liquid. What would I do with these player situations? First of all, I wouldn't take a Dren back. I 100% would not take him back just because of what I said earlier about the fact that you've already cut him. He'd be first on chopping block. He knows that he'd be the first one on the chopping block. If there's ever any kind of issue with performance or slump of the team, both the team and Dren himself are just going to feel like he's ready to go. I would tell him, if you want to coach, we'll give you the coaching spot, we'll give you analyst spot, we'll give you whatever you need to keep you on this roster to help us tactically and strategically, but we're not bringing you on as a player. And if he says okay, awesome. If not, okay, let him go. That's just the kind of the best way that I would approach that. Next, I would determine if s1mple is going to be the primary op or not. I would say because obviously this whole Kusta s1mple thing, it's not going to work if s1mple is going to just be like, I'm the primary op and that's it. It's not going to work. So you need to determine if you're going to give the AWP to s1mple or if you're going to give it to Kusta, because the other one's got to be gone. If they're both dead set, if s1mple's dead set on being the primary opper, then yeah, Kusta's got to go. But on top of that, if s1mple wants to be the primary opper, it actually, no matter what, if I'm bringing s1mple back, I sit him down. I essentially just put him on probation. I'm like, listen, not allowed to have any issues during practice, during matches. If you throw a fucking fit and we have to cancel practice or delay practice, or you're arguing, or you're being a diva, whatever it might be, you're gone. I tell him flat out, if we're moving forward with him not being the primary op, I just tell him you're only allowed to pick it up in secondary op tactics. Like, you're not allowed to be the primary op. And that's something that could change in the future if there's certain rounds that he should be the primary opper, if there's certain rounds where maybe he feels he could take advantage of it, but he has to like learn how to be a team player. I would sit him down and I'm say 1 to 2 hours per day, we're watching your personal demos together. Me and if I'm the coach, I'm watching a demo with s1mple every single day, and I am highlighting and I am telling him and I'm going through all the mistakes he makes as an individual player, and I'm making him explain to me the logic behind what he did. Why are you making this play? Why are you jumping off and being aggressive here? Why are you not playing with your teammates? I'm just going through every single demo that I notice these massive issues in, which essentially is every match, and I'm making sure he understands that this is not good. This is not good enough for the team, that he needs to become better. He's already highly skilled, but if he can fit that into a team environment, then all of a sudden he's going to be an amazing player. But because he's not, he's actually costing the team rounds. And if he can't do any of these, if he says, no, I don't want to do it, I just say, okay, stay in Ukraine. Don't come back. And that's kind of the situation that they're in right now, because they're determining, with someone as skilled as him, they've obviously had a good amount of success, more success than they've ever had without him. It is that, where's the trade-off between he's so incredibly skilled, how much leeway do we give him? Well, at the moment, he's got way too much, so he's got to get reined back in. And even with this level of skill, you're just, the way that this team has progressed with him in the lineup is that his game determines whether they succeed or not, and it can't be that way at a professional level. You have to be able to succeed as a team, or else you're not going to consistently get to the top. And that's kind of what we see between MLG, where he played great, where the things all worked out for him, where all of his plays for the most part worked, where he had someone like a Hiko and a Dren kind of stepping up beside him, Leash during certain matches, and then we go to Malmo, and when he's making these super individual plays and no one else is stepping up behind him, there's no one to cover the gaps that his plays are kind of making in their tactics. So you have to fit him into a team design, and if it's not going to work, then it's not going to work, and then you just have to sacrifice the skill and say, we'll figure it out elsewhere. So I started this off by saying that these visa issues of s1mple were actually a blessing in disguise, because now Liquid gets 3 to 4 weeks. They get to have a better practice environment where there's not as much hostility, there's not as much negative energy. They get to practice in that. They get to give Kusta the AWP and just say, go nuts with it. Give him a lot of freedom, see what he's going to step up and do. They're going to go to Austin without s1mple. They'll have Kusta and a Dren, and they'll get to see how Kusta plays in Austin against, not the level of competition that was at Malmo, but it should be, mostly North American teams, I believe, and then I think there should be some like 1 or 2 tier 2 European teams, like I'm not exactly sure who, but I think there's going to be 1 or 2 European teams. So that'll give him some experience, and that'll allow Liquid to actually see how Kusta has developed as a player over these last 2 or 3 months. This gives him a chance now to show what he's done and where he can go and what he's learned and how he can work in this situation. Give them something to work with, and then they can kind of decide from there. But they have 3 to 4 weeks now where there should be no confusion as to who's playing what role. as to how these practices are going to go. With s1mple over in Ukraine, that they get to just monitor, two of these roster guys, Adren and Kusta, they get to see what they want from them in the future, and if they're going to keep them on the roster. So they do have a big decision to make, and actually, this is all mismanagement though from Team Liquid. A little bit of it is just kind of the Valve minor and major system kind of screwing over that whole Adren Kusta trade pickup situation, but ever since then. Ever since the major ended, it's essentially been very, very mismanaged. So they actually, this team is kind of in shambles right now. It's actually amazing that a North American team that went to the major, got to the semifinals at this point, has so many question marks surrounding them. And these are issues, by the way. Some of these are issues that I thought would completely ruin them at the major. This is why I didn't predict them to get out of groups, because you look at all this shit and you're just like, how did this not happen earlier? This has always just been like, a second away from just exploding. So hopefully they can figure that stuff out, but yeah, that's what I would do. If it comes down to a situation where it's s1mple primary opping and he accepts everything that I said about like the probation, about watching demos, about having no issues during matches, if he's going to accept all that, then I say okay. And if he still wants to be a primary opper, then you have to take s1mple over Kusta, just because that's an insane talent. And if he's going to concede to listen to all that information and listen to all those things that we tell him to do, then he's worth it. And you'll just have to go from there and take that risk moving forward. But no matter how talented he is, it's not going to work if he's not going to try and work in the team environment.